My wife and I were held captive in a box. Someone is taking Schrodinger's cat too far. 1 minute, my wife and I were grabbing a nightcap at the bar down the street, having an innocent conversation with a stranger. The next, we were both waking up in total darkness, groggy and confused. "Laura?" I called out into the void, my voice raspy, after waking up from what felt like an intensely deep sleep. "Tom?" My wife called back, her voice sounding similarly exhausted. After a minute of feeling around in the darkness, we eventually found each other and embraced. "Where are we?" Laura asked. "I'm not quite sure," I replied. "How did we even get here?" "He must have drugged us?" "He?" The stranger that struck up a conversation with us at the bar. I knew something felt off about him. Off about me? Suddenly, a horrifying, synthesized voice rang out through what must have been a pair of overhead speakers mounted to the ceiling. Before suddenly, the lights turned on. My wife and I both gasped, as our eyes, having just gotten adjusted to the dark, were blinded by a pair of overhead lights. Eventually, our eyes adjusted again, and we were able to discern our surroundings. A large room designed in the shape of a perfect box, each of its walls a giant mirror, with nothing inside it save for 4 things. A machete. A table. A cat, which sat perched atop the table, rolling around on its back. And a door, located on one of the box's 4 walls. I ran over to open the door, but sure enough, it was locked. Then my wife and I both looked around for any other exits. Nothing. I looked up at the ceiling. There, mounted beside the overhead lights, were the 2 speakers we'd heard the voice emanate from. And beside them, what looked like ventilation grates. "What is this place?" I asked aloud, before the metallic voice called out again over the speakers. "Like what I've done with the place? What's going on? Where are we?" my wife called out. "Good questions," the stranger replied, "but I would have thought your first question would be asking who I am." "Who are you then?" I asked. "Why would I tell you that? If you get out of here, you could use it against me." "If we get out of here?" I asked. "Correct. The if is totally up to you." "Up to us? What are you talking about?" Laura asked. "You're to play a game. The rules are simple. As of right now, from outside the box, you are both dead and alive at the same time. Win the game, and you can leave alive. Lose the game, and you die." "Schrodinger's cat," my wife replied, referencing the famous thought experiment by Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger, wherein a cat placed in a closed box with an equal chance of dying can be considered both dead and alive at the same time while its fate is unknown. "Ah, glad you got the reference." Laura looked at the cat on the table. "A little on the nose much?" "Well, sometimes you have to be literal to prove a point." "So how do we win?" I interrupted, growing tired of the back and forth. "Another good question. You see the door over there?" "Yes," Laura and I both replied, looking over at it. "It's locked and can only be opened with a key. A key that is hidden in the box somewhere." Laura and I both immediately scanned the room, but again, all we saw were the same 4 things. The machete. The table. The cat. And the door. We both studied them, before looking at the cat, and turning to one another. "You don't think the key is in the cat?" I interrupted. We then both looked over at the machete, before turning back to each other. "No. We can't," my wife said. "Then we'll have to wait," I suggested. "Wait? Till the key comes out of it. The natural way." Suddenly, we heard the synthetic voice begin to count down over the speakers. 60. 59. 58. 57. 56. 55. "Fuck," I cried out, realizing that we didn't have time to wait. Once again, I went to reach for the machete, but once again, Laura stepped in front of me. "No. The key's gotta be hidden somewhere else," she insisted. "But where?" I asked. For a 3rd time, we both began frantically searching the room. This time we tried looking under the table. Nothing. Then, we tried to pry open the lights, speakers, and vents. But all of them were sealed shut. 40. 39. 38. Once again, I reached for the machete, this time picking it up. But this time, my wife stood between myself and the cat. "Laura, get out of the way," I insisted. "I can't let you do that, Tom," she replied. "The key is in the cat." "We don't know that." "Exactly. I'm gonna find out." "You're gonna sacrifice a cat over your own life? You're gonna sacrifice your own life for a cat's?" "No, the key must be somewhere else." Trusting Laura's instincts, I put the machete down on the table, and we both began searching the box for a 4th time, as the voice continued counting down, closer and closer to 0. 25. 24. 23. But for a fourth time, we came up empty-handed. That's when I saw what appeared to be a proverbial light bulb go off in my wife's head. What is it? But before I could finish asking, Laura put her finger down her throat and gagged herself. We both leaned in, expecting to hear the clink of a key. Splash. But all we heard were the contents of yesterday's bar food, splattering all over the ground. She shot me a look, and I immediately knew what she was suggesting. No, I can't. I've never made myself throw up before. I resisted. That's when she ran over and took me by the hand. Do you want to live? Yes. Then sit down on that table. I did as she said. 10. 9. 8. She began to stick her finger down my throat, causing me to immediately flinch. Stop, I mumbled, unable to properly speak with her hand in my mouth. But it was too late. Before I could push her away, I vomited. We both leaned in, once again expecting to hear the clink of a key. Splash. But all we heard were the contents of my own stomach, splattering all over the ground. With the countdown almost over, we both looked at each other and began to panic. That's when my wife dropped her, and took a step back. Fine, just do it. Are you sure? Just do it. Okay. I picked up the machete. 3. Walked over to the cat. 2. And raised the blade above my head. 1. But I couldn't bring myself to do it, freezing in place. Wah. 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 As a loud alarm suddenly went off, before silence. The alarm stopped. My wife and I both collapsed to the floor, both hyperventilating from the traumatic experience, as we looked up at the vents, and expected a gas pour out and kill us. But instead, all we saw were 2 speakers rattle, as the synthetic voice called out, "Congratulations. You've won the game." But we didn't find the key? My wife asked, confused by the change of rules. I had told you the key was hidden in the box somewhere. The man began to explain. But I never said it was a literal one. The key was your own morality. Deciding not to kill the cat, despite the assumption that the literal key was inside. And that's worth winning? I asked. You'd be surprised. You're the only ones this month who passed the test. Wait. How often do you do this? Laura asked. But the stranger had gone silent. Click. Suddenly, we both heard the handle to the box's door unlock. Laura and I gathered all of our strength, rushed over to the door, and let ourselves out of the box, its door slamming behind us. When we finally caught our breath outside it, we looked around, and found ourselves inside a large empty airplane hangar. My wife and I both turned back to the box, the one-sided mirrors lining its walls allowing us to peer in, only to see the cat still lying there, completely unaware of the fate that could have befallen it. What the fuck was that? I asked my wife. I don't know, she replied. But before we could dwell on it too much, we heard the sound of vents turning on above us. We both looked up at the ceiling, to find a colored gas billowing out of yet another set of vents. Laura and I turned to each other, a look of horror in both of our eyes, as the hangar quickly filled with smoke. 1 minute, my wife and I were standing there in the hangar, outside of the box that the stranger had held us in. The next, we were both waking up in total darkness, groggy and confused. Laura? I called out into the void, my voice raspy, after waking up from what felt like an intensely deep sleep. Tom? My wife called back, her voice similarly exhausted. After a minute of feeling around the darkness, we eventually found each other, and embraced. Where are we? Laura asked. I'm not quite sure. I replied. How did we even get here? He must have drugged us?
Interesting.
I stopped for a moment, half expecting to hear the stranger's horrifying, synthesized voice ring out through a pair of overhead speakers mounted to the roof above us. Before suddenly, a light turned on. I gasped, as my eyes, having just gotten adjusted to the dark, were blinded by the light. Eventually, my eyes adjusted again, and I was able to discern my surroundings. There before me was our bedroom, and sitting beside me on the bed was Laura, who had just turned on the light by her bedside table. We both looked at each other, and let out a sigh of relief. He had let us go. That was years ago. Since that time, we've never heard from the stranger again. Or found out why he did that to us in the first place. And we especially, never, ever set foot in the bar down the street, where we had met him. All I know is, he's still out there somewhere. Sometimes, I wonder if the same is true of the cat we saved. If it was freed after our game, or ended up in the next one. If it's alive. Or dead. But until I find out, it's both alive and dead at the same time.